Good afternoon, everyone. It's a little cold in here, so feel free to do some movement to keep yourself warm, but I'm sure Dr. Kahl's lecture will set you on fire to keep you warm throughout her time with us. So I'm delighted to, my name is Suyan Park. I'm the academic dean here at Union Theological Seminary. And I am delighted to introduce to you, who probably needs no introduction, but I'll try anyway, Dr. Brigitte Kahl, Professor of New Testament at Union. I first met Professor Brigitte Kahl when she came to Union in 1998. And she came with Dr. Jan Raymond, and I see right next to it, and their 3-year-old son, I think 3 years. Jacob was 3 years old. And they were neighbors to Mary Boyce, who was then my doctoral advisor. So I saw quite a bit of them. I saw quite a bit of Jacob running in and out of the apartments because they had a separate doorway that connected, the secret doorway that connected the two apartments, and Jacob was always in Dr. Boyce's apartment having snacks or whatever, and he got into everything, running around, and you'll see among many of the endearing experiences that I have at that time, I recall Jacob getting into everything and everywhere, then followed by Dr. Kahl's voice, Jacob, 9999. Very enduring memory. And one of the folk memories, and of course, Dr. Boyce is traveling right now, I'm sure she'll be here, would be here herself, but she couldn't confirm the story, is that when Dr. Kahl received a phone call from Union to offer her her position as professor of New Testament, what was she doing? No, she was not at her desk writing or thinking some lofty thoughts. She was not exegeting Paul. She was on her hands and knees cleaning the floor in her home. Accomplished, creative thinker, scholar, she is someone, in Korean, we would call it salim, as in one who makes life. And for the next 27 years, she made life for us, for this community, with her presence, her gifts, her teaching, stepping into doing whatever that needs to be done. A native of East Germany, I promised Dr. Kahl I will not say anything to embarrass her today, so I am keeping the promise. So now it's all what's on the website. A native of East Germany, an ordained minister, Dr. Kahl studied and taught at Humboldt University in Berlin between 1970 and 1997, earning not one, but 2 doctorates in New Testament and ecumenics. Professor Brigitte Kahl truly embodies the prophetic imagination that Union values. She brings a remarkable empire-critical perspective that has reshaped how we read Paul and the Bible in the shadow, or perhaps in the belly, of the empire, past and present. Very relevant. Among her many scholarly works, her groundbreaking work, Galatians Reimagined, Reading with the Eyes of the Vanquished, is a revolutionary, completely reframing Paul's theology as resistance literature against Roman imperial ideology, and the way she connects ancient imperial propaganda with contemporary power structure makes her scholarship especially relevant in our current political climate. So thank you, Dr. Kahl, for sharing your wisdom with us today. So please join me in welcoming Brigitte Kahl to the lectern.
Oh my God, what to say after such an introduction. Welcome all. Welcome for coming. Good afternoon. Thank you, Sue, for this lovely, generous, and very detailed introduction. Yes, it's true, I had forgotten that. I was on my knees scrubbing the kitchen floor when I got this letter of invitation to Union some 28 years ago. And yes, it was a very good time to be here. And time went very fast, I must say. Time at Union moves more quickly than anywhere else. And it was never boring. It never is boring at Union. Yes, but let us get to our topic. The God of the brother. Can you hear me? Right? Okay. More distance, that's better? Yeah? So? Even like that? Even better? Okay. Okay. So, the God of the brother. Musings about the interreligions of Cain and Abel from a poly-religious Bible classroom. So on the long, long list of biblical courses that have been taught at Union since 1836, BX 101 Introduction to the Bible is a new arrival and somewhat sticks out. BX 101 is a course that promises to read the biblical story from Genesis to Revelation in one single semester, touching upon the major landmarks of the narrative that has shaped Western civilization. Like no other story, creation, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, the Tower of Babel, Abraham and his upside-down family, the Exodus, the conquest, the kings and their failure, and finally the exile. And then a rewrite of the entire story in the so-called New Testament. New questions arise if you read these somewhat familiar texts in the unfamiliar setting of an interreligious classroom where the majority of students are not or no longer subscribing to Christianity and mostly don't know the Bible at all. It is actually an adventure in a widely and wildly uncharted territory beyond the grasp of traditional Bible studies. And I have often been wondering about my esteemed forefathers in the Bible department here at Union, some of whom were accused of heresy at their lifetime and who are now sitting in heaven at their high chairs for the final judgment. What are you thinking about this? And yes, it is the season of remembering our ancestors. Samhain and All Hallows Eve is close, which was Reformation Day in my Protestant upbringing long ago. And Sandra keeps reminding us of remembering our ancestors, and there is one famous foremothers in the Bible, in Bible studies, that I want to pay particular tribute to today, Phyllis Tribble. She just passed away. Back to BX 101. The elephant in the BX 101 classroom naturally is biblical monotheism and the question to what extent religious tolerance or intolerance is rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition. In Union speak, the IE question, interreligious engagement. Is the one God of the Bible who categorically prohibits other gods a declaration of war against other religions? I'm the Lord your God, you shall not have other gods before me, for I am a jealous God. This is the first commandment, written on a stone tablet by God's self on Mount Sinai and smashed shortly after by Moses in a fit of rage, when he sees that the people are happily dancing around the golden calf. They had felt abandoned during his long absence on the mountain, and now they no longer are. And all goes terribly wrong. The golden calf programmatically stomps into the biblical story world as an avatar of other gods, the prime example of apostasy, idolatry, the forbidden. If we read on, we find many, many more passages where the people of God are strictly prohibited to go after such other gods, the gods of their surrounding neighbors. Transgression is severely punished. So it seems pretty clear that the other gods of the first commandment are the gods of the others, of other religions. Are they? This is my question. I want to go back to a story I have been pondering for a long time. It actually was the content of my inaugural lecture here at Union some 27 years ago. Cain and Abel and Eve. Here's my thesis. Genesis 4 is one of the sharpest and most relentless critiques of established religion in the big books of humanity, and from Feuerbach to Marx and Freud. But rather than the worship of other gods as the gods of others, it identifies primarily the worship of power and privilege under the disguise of worshiping our God as the core of idolatry and apostasy. This, I believe, has vast implications for an interreligious reading of the Bible. So let us take a look at the text. Genesis 4, in a programmatic way, talks about the origin of religion. It is, in fact, the biblical origin story of religion. Paradise is over in chapter 3, the doors of Eden are shut closed, and somehow, naturally, religion starts. And it is not that God had asked for it. In fact, Cain is the one who invents it all by himself. Who is Cain? Cain is the firstborn of Eve and of humanity. A man I have produced with the help of the Lord, as Eve proudly declares in verse 1. And you have the handouts to take a look. So Cain is not a baby, not a child, but a man, a male, masculinity. This is noteworthy. And somehow it makes sense that Cain, the man produced by Eve and God, feels called or entitled or obliged to approach God with a sacrifice. A sacrifice is a gift to the deity, and the expectation is that it makes the deity give back, blessing, material prosperity, well-being. This is the archetype of religion as mutually beneficial gift exchange. I give so that you give back, do ut des. The prosperity gospel in a nutshell. This is the normalcy of religion, the I, me, us-centered religion. And if the biblical God was a normal God, the God we imagine, he would gladly put down Cain's name as number one of the eternal donors list of pious gift-giving and make sure good things keep coming his way. But everything goes terribly wrong already here. And God's self is the one who spoils everything. He doesn't seem to know the most basic rules in the sacred playbook of religion. He ignores Cain's sacrifice and instead looks at the gift of Cain's brother Abel. This triggers the first war of religion in human history, still fought on a one-on-one scale. Cain wins, he kills Abel, and it is all God's fault. Commentators have tried to make sense of this appalling injustice and unfairness and, frankly, misbehavior of God right at the beginning of the big biblical story. Several solutions to this theological conundrum have been circulating throughout the centuries. Number one, the big dogmatics solution. It is the divine freedom of an omnipotent God to choose one and to reject the other, predestination. Who are we, human beings, to challenge God's eternal choice? Number two, the ritual solution. Abel offers God a precious firstling sacrifice of his flock. Cain doesn't care to bring the first fruits of his harvest. That's why. Three, the gourmet solution. God simply likes a good lamb roast from Abel's flock better than the veggies of Cain the farmer. Are we to blame God for his culinary choices? And then the take-it-easy solution. It is not such a big deal. God is capricious, you know. Cain should just get his act together, practice frustration management, and move on. And finally, the "this is how the world works" solution. Bad things happen to good people. The just have to suffer injustice. Just get used to it. None of these explanations sounds right. Yes, bad things happen to good people, but what if God's self is the one who invents injustice right at the threshold of human history and as inaugural act of religion? If religion therefore starts as a bloody mess. I'm following a different strand of interpretation here that is infused with the wisdom of Jewish and liberation theology. Traditionally, the gaze of interpreters was fixated on what happened between God and Cain and God and Abel. This is the vertical gaze of religion. But what actually is going on between Cain and Abel on the horizontal level? Cain is the firstborn of Eve and of humanity. She has celebrated his birth with a triumphant outcry of pride. I have produced a man with the help of God, a male. Nothing like that happens when Abel is born. Just next she bore his brother Abel. That's it. What a contrast. She doesn't name him, she doesn't celebrate him, she doesn't mention any connection between Abel and God. Abel is just the other one, the runt of the litter. It is Cain who in this setting is clearly singled out as the important one, the firstborn, the number one who matters, the alpha male of human history and genealogy. Not accidentally, Abel's name means nothingness, vapor. And the story treats him as such, as nobody, negligible. Neither Eve nor Cain interact with him in any way, pay him any attention. He is just Abel, his brother, not more than an annex to Cain the man with God. Cain at no point becomes a brother to Abel, and it doesn't seem to cross his mind that they could actually bring this sacrifice together to God. He is the one who has a firm hold on God. This is what counts. He is born as the founder of religion, and religion here means the perpetuation and confirmation of the status quo of male privilege and power. This is what God is expected to affirm. Abel, on the other hand, is not the man with God, just the brother, the other, and it is not even clear whether he is entitled at all to bring God a sacrifice, too. It takes guts to just follow suit after Cain starts the ritual communication with God. And of course, Abel takes very special care with his sacrifice. He brings the firstlings precisely because he is not the firstborn, but the second. And now God. God in this setting does two things. First, he breaks out of the iron cage, or perhaps golden cage, religion is about to enshrine him in. Religion as the transcendent garnish to conducting business as usual. God bypasses the reputable, the established one, and chooses the other, the insignificant, the small one, the neglected one. There is a high and low, in and out in this story that has often been overlooked. And if we take this social setting seriously, God does not invent injustice, but on the contrary, God performs an act of restorative justice. Second, not surprisingly, already there in Genesis 4, Cain, as the privileged one, bluntly rejects this challenge to his masculine supremacy as unjust, unfair, and an outrageous imposition, and he sulks. But God reveals that his preferential option for the brother, the other, doesn't mean that Cain is rejected. On the contrary, God makes an extraordinary effort to have Cain understand that being in a right relationship with God cannot be separate from being in a right relationship with the brother, the other. So Cain gets this unique divine tutorial in theological ethics. Verses 6 and 7 are a notoriously difficult text to translate, but the gist is pretty clear. Doing good is not necessarily the same as doing religion. It means raising the head not just up to heaven, but to raising the head to finally see the brother, the unseen one. Cain should stop being furious and drown in self-pity, for this is how sin must be mastered and can be mastered even after the fall and even after the virus of original sin supposedly has entered into the bloodstream of humanity. Yeah, but that is not the Bible, that's Augustine. God reveals God's self as God with the other, and that is why religion already in Genesis 4 hits a wall and is discontinued. Cain refuses the otherness and other concern of God. He doesn't want to be lectured on theological ethics and liberation theology and wokeism. Cain has an other God in mind that he wants to serve and worship, not a God who takes care of the brother, but a God in the image of the man, the male, the first one, the strong one, the self-sufficient self, myself. What does this mean? I think it means that the first act of worship in the Bible is an act of idolatry that shows religion as the naturally evolving worship of a self-made and self-serving deity at the expense of the other. Idolatry in this reading is not their religion, the religion of the others, but our religion, the religion of privilege and status we crave and cling to, the religion that puts God at the top of the pyramid of power, a religion that may well perform the proper rituals and recite the correct creeds, but neglects justice and caretaking for the other. The religion of Cain is the religion of power, the religion of the golden calf, our natural religion as humanity, biblically speaking. But at the same time, it is an interreligion, because it can infest and has infested Christianity, as it can infest Judaism or any other religion. So Cain kills Abel, and God can't save him, the one he favors. What a failure. God loses big time. Cain wins. His archetypal religion of power will spread interreligiously from now on as humanity starts to grow and diversify into different clans, tribes, nations, cultures. There will be Lamechs singing their sword songs. There will be the Nephilim, the Nimrods of empire building, and many more. Not quite. At the very end of the chapter in Genesis 4:25, a notoriously neglected verse, Eve gives birth to another son, Seth. And this time, everything is different. God has appointed for me another child in place of Abel, for Cain has killed him. So Eve explicitly dedicates Seth as a stand-in for Abel. She is the first human who even pronounces Abel's name. And rather than glorifying Cain as the man with God, she declares him a murderer. The murderer of his brother Abel. And Eve relocates God as a God with Abel and Seth, rather than with Cain. This is the decisive turning point of the story and of human history, as the Bible sees it. Eve recognizes God as the God with the brother, as the other one. With Seth, the term other, acher, turns up for the first time in the Bible, as Rabbi Mike Moskowitz reminded me the other day. Thank you for this. And I really think this is theologically very relevant, the other, for the first time. And then if we look at the next chapter in Genesis 5:3, Seth will be listed, Seth, not Cain, will be listed as the firstborn of humanity, which he is not, in fact. In other words, there is a powerful divine act of genetic or genealogical engineering that makes Cain, the real firstborn, to be replaced by Seth, who stands in for Abel. My last point. With the son of Seth, Enosh, religion as calling upon the name of God is given a fresh start. The text lets us know in 4:26. What is the religion of Enosh, son of Seth, Abel, that replaces the interreligion of Cain? Is this Judaism? Is it Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, Hinduism, Wiccan, Celtic, pagan, indigenous religion? None of those exist yet. Humanity is still at the very beginning, undifferentiated by any ethnic, cultural, or religious labels, just human in the image of God. Enosh means in fact human, and I tend to think that Enosh's religion is the interreligion of shared humanity in taking care of one another, in recognizing the image of God in the face of the other, the brother or sister. So, the idols are not necessarily the gods of the others. Again and again, the other gods turn out to be our gods, the gods of power and privilege and prosperity, for us alone. the gods in the image of the king, the warrior, the billionaire, the alpha male. Not accidentally, the first programmatic act of idolatry in the Bible, of fabricating an other god, was not committed by the others, the pagans, the Canaanites, but by us, the people of God. I don't think that this solves all problems, but it definitely is a productive point of departure for reading the Bible in an interreligious classroom. And this is my last sentence. The critique of our religion as a religion in neglect of the other is a strong undercurrent that runs through the entire biblical narrative and surfaces again and again in powerful ways. Paul in the New Testament is another dramatic truth moment where the mold of our religion is shattered and a painful self-exposure to Abel the other, the not us of the Gentiles, breaks in. But this would be another talk. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Do we have any comments or questions?
Hello. I was wondering if you could speak to the role of the dirt or the earth in this interreligious violence between Abel and Cain, particularly the blood crying out from the earth, and how you think that plays a role. The role of the earth in Genesis 4, as a mediating factor between Cain and Abel, or something along those lines?
Yeah, that is a very intriguing piece, right in Genesis 4. So I have focused on Eve, but in fact, the first voice that, apart from God, that aligns itself with Abel is Adamah, is the earth. Because the earth, and God mentions that the earth has taken the blood of Abel in her mouth, and it is crying, and she's a she's an actor there, and it cries out from her mouth. So Eve and God are the only people who kind of are aligned with Abel in that story. And I think this is very powerful if we look at the role of the Adamah all throughout the primeval story. And yeah, thanks for mentioning that.
So you've talked about how Cain and Abel is as much a story about, what's the word I'm looking for? About justice, social justice, and how, Cain is banished. But I was also wondering, though, about how you've also mentioned actually about civilization and about the creation, and I'm saying this about in our class, how you've talked about, civilization and, Judaism and what is civilization, or is the Bible in some respects anti-civilization, which brings back to the Tower of Babel. But in this case, though, I'm wondering too about the fact that in some respects, God is actually rewarding the one who initially spills blood on the ground in the sacrifice of the animals, of those firstborn animals. And yet, And so therefore the one that is bringing forth from the earth without that bloodletting is actually the one who's punished. And I'm curious as to, you know, how you see that as well.
So you ask about civilization, and
Civilization-
you ask about Abel's bloody sacrifice.
Yes.
Yeah. So, well, civilization is a big thing in Genesis 4. It comes right after the origin of religion, because the descendants of Cain, and we have that in our Bibles mostly. So, the kind of after the murder of the brother, in our Bibles, civilization starts, and it is started by Cain and his descendants going until Lamech, where it explodes in a kind of in rhetoric of violence and murdering, and it's I think really the first war song in history. That is Lamech. So that is clearly the point when Eve steps into the story again, totally anachronistically. And so there are good reasons why this verse has been neglected, because, you know, she must really be dead for a long, long time at that point. But she comes back and does something extraordinary and confronts the Lamechites and the Cainites with a different, and the genealogy takes a different turn at that point. So yes, and I don't know whether, and then the other thing, yes, Abel is the first one who brings a sacrifice, a bloody sacrifice. Yeah, I mean, I think the story doesn't see it as, I don't know, this is a good question, and we could talk a long time about that. So the animals, Abel is a farmer, and Abel is a shepherd. He has animals, and he brings what he produces. So that is the natural way how we handle sacrifice, that we bring what we have. And Cain is a farmer, who kind of a peasant, and he although I think in general the two were together, so that is not a time where we have only farming and only animals, so they belong together, but they are also separate. And I don't know, so the thing is, I don't know whether the point is that Abel is punished for sacrificing animals. But you can make in terms of what
not so much that Abel is the one that's punished for bringing animals, but that Abel is actually praised for killing those animals, for letting that blood, while later on when Cain kills his brother, he's punished for that blood sacrifice. Now, one of them is done as a sign of worship, and the other one is done in anger. So there is that difference.
Okay.
But in some respects, it's like the elevation of that letting of blood that Abel does versus the cultivation of the land and the bringing forth is almost punished. Or not punished, but ignored.
Interesting question. Yeah. Tony?
Thank you, Dr. Kahl, for the amazing presentation and reading. You started with identifying different readings of the text, like the traditional way of reading the text, before moving to your reading as God siding with the least privileged among the two brothers. I'm just curious to what extent this reading exists in scholarship, in biblical scholarship, and if it does, is it a minority ways of reading the text? That's my question.
You mean the reading that I have presented here?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean this reading in my personal story of in academia. This goes back to something like 40 years ago when I first was confronted with the Amsterdam school where I learned that first. So this is called Derlo, Roches Surmond, and Breukelmann. It's a school that is very strongly influenced by the Bible translation of Martin Buber and Jewish exegesis. But then I found this same reading in liberation theology. For example, I think the most recent commentary by Miguel de la Torre, I mean, this is, that has this reading. I mean, it goes unto the reading that it recognizes the inequality between the two brothers. So that is recognized. It doesn't see this as the reason why God favors Abel. So that is missing. But it is not missing in Milton Schwantes and Severino Croato. So they have this reading. So that is, but of course it's a minority reading. You are right. That is not so much in traditional Western scholarship.
Yeah, I think it's my turn. So it really seems that everything in your interpretation is kind of upside down compared to the traditional interpretation. So the apparently unjust, really? Okay, close. The apparently unjust decision of God, you interpret it as a critique of religion as ideological reproduction of domination, and you propose another religion, the Enoch religion, as a religion of shared humanity. And I wanted to ask, doesn't that change the whole confrontation between Christian theology and humanism, which is so important for
theology
and humanism?
Yes.
I mean, this is a defining front line in the history of Christianity, the polemics against humanism. And in your interpretation, that confrontation kind of falls flat, collapses. Is that a correct interpretation?
Yeah, and I think really this is what is at stake in these first chapters of the Bible. What does it mean to be human, and what is humane? Oh, sorry. Well, I think this defines these first chapters of the Bible. How is humanity actually defined? And that's why this, what Eve does naturally, and I think the conversion of Eve in this story is really the decisive point, because she is the first one who recognizes this, that she first thinks that the alpha male, Cain, is what defines humanity. And you know, this is about genealogy building here. So we are going to build the first genealogy of humanity. And the first so-called naturally born human is the one who defines humanity. That's the logic of primogeniture. I mean, that's, you know, he is the one who has the defining power over humanity. Now, if it is Cain, then we as humans are what we often think we are under the dictatorship of original sin, namely bad. Really, we are inclined to kill. We are inclined to, you know, when we don't get our way, we just get rid of our brothers Abel and sisters. And so that's why it is so important that this, what I call genealogical engineering, takes place at that point, that the story revises the order of the firstborn and puts Abel in the first place by starting with Seth, who is given in place of Abel, for Cain has killed him. So it is like we are not defined by the selfish gene, or we are not defined by the killer genes, but we are defined by differently. And the interesting thing is that doesn't mean that the Cainites are rejected. They are still there, because in this Sethite genealogy in Genesis 5, all the Cainites come back. A little bit changed, but they are all there. But they are put under a different defining principle. They are no longer the first ones. They are the third ones. They start starts after Enosh, the Cainites come back. So this is, you know, we always think that genealogies are the most boring thing in the Bible. And I try to teach BX 101 that this is not the case. Genealogies can be very exciting. But yes, I think the question is, who are we as human beings? And who is God? Who is this God? Not the God we always want to fabricate ourselves, but the God of this book. So that is the question.
Thank you so much. Let's...
Thank you so much. Thank you, Dr. Kahl. I have an announcement to make, and it is with joy and sadness that Dr. Brigitte Kahl has announced that she will retire at the end of this semester, this year. So if you're taking her BX 101, this will be her last BX 101. She is still teaching the January course, so there is still time to take a course with Dr. Kahl in January, but that will be her last course. And just wanted to announce that for everyone. You will be the first to hear. This will be the first public announcement of her retirement. So why don't we all give her a hand of applause. Appreciate it.